The recruitment center on Luna Station looked like any other military processing facility: stark white walls, holographic displays, and a constant hum of advanced life support systems. But Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez knew it was anything but ordinary. Around her, recruits from Earth's most devastated colonies carried a rage that transcended typical military motivation. Her file was extraordinary, even by the standards of the Rapid Response Colonial Defense Force. Born to a family of terraforming engineers on the outer colony of New Santiago, Elena had watched her world transform from a barren rock to a thriving ecosystem. Her parents had been among the first wave of settlers who understood that humanity's future lay not in preserving what existed, but in creating something entirely new. The recruitment officer, a grizzled veteran named Commander Reyes, studied her enhanced personnel file. Cybernetic integration scores off the charts. Psychological resilience that bordered on the superhuman. Advanced tactical training combined with a doctorate in xenoengineering. The kind of candidate that came once in a generation. Rodriguez, Reyes spoke, his voice a low gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate with contained intensity. We're not looking for soldiers. We're looking for architects of interstellar justice. The wall behind him flickered to life, displaying a three-dimensional reconstruction of the Zarkov attack. Precision-guided plasma streams cutting through civilian habitation zones. Orbital bombardment that turned thriving colonies into radioactive glass. Each frame was a testament to calculated brutality. Elena didn't flinch. Where most would see horror, she saw a complex tactical problem waiting to be solved. Her background was unique, even among the most elite human military personnel. Her grandmother had been part of the first generation of genetic engineers who understood how to push human potential beyond traditional limitations. Her grandfather was a quantum computing pioneer who believed that intelligence was less about raw processing power and more about adaptive thinking. The recruitment center wasn't just selecting soldiers. They were cultivating a weapon far more complex than any starship or plasma cannon. Commander Reyes continued, sliding a data crystal across the table. The Indomitable Project requires someone who understands that revenge is a strategy, not an emotion. Someone who can transform collective human suffering into a precise, surgical response. Elena's cybernetic hand, a marvel of biomechanical engineering that responded to her neural impulses faster than any organic limb ever could, closed around the crystal. Microscopic data tendrils extended, instantly analyzing its contents. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting holographic schematics of advanced spacecraft designs. "I want a recalibration of galactic power dynamics." The recruitment center around her seemed to hold its breath. Another recruit would have seen this as a mission. Elena Rodriguez saw it as an equation waiting to be solved, and she was about to become its primary variable. The Titan Research Complex wasn't just a laboratory. It was humanity's most heavily guarded intellectual sanctuary. Buried 5 kilometers beneath the Martian surface, it represented the culmination of decades of breakthrough research that had been intentionally kept from the broader galactic community. Dr. Aisha Nakamura stood before a holographic schematic that would have made most xenobiological engineers weep. Her team had long ago abandoned traditional design paradigms. Where other species saw technology as a tool, humans saw it as a living, evolving organism. The Indomitable's quantum adaptive shield was born from an unlikely marriage of disciplines. Theoretical physics met biological mimicry, with inspiration drawn from everything from deep-sea creature camouflage to quantum entanglement principles. Each layer of the shield was a living, thinking membrane that could predict, adapt, and transform faster than any incoming threat could comprehend. "It's not about blocking," Dr. Nakamura explained to a group of visiting military strategists. "It's about conversation. Our shield doesn't just defend. It negotiates with incoming energy, redirecting, dispersing, sometimes even converting hostile intent into neutral potential." The artificial intelligence that powered the system, ARIA, was itself a marvel of human ingenuity. Unlike the rigid, rule-based AIs of other species, ARIA was designed with a core principle of emergent learning. She didn't just process data. She understood context, predicted probabilistic outcomes, and made decisions that bordered on intuitive. In the adjacent laboratory, a team of neurological engineers worked on something even more radical. The ship's control systems weren't just interfaced with human operators. They were becoming an extension of human consciousness itself. Experimental neural bridges allowed pilots to think faster than traditional reaction times, transforming the entire ship into a living, breathing extension of human will. Commander Elena Rodriguez's initial systems integration test had been nothing short of revolutionary. When she first connected to the ship's neural network, the testing team watched in awe as ARIA's computational matrix seemed to breathe in sync with Elena's own neural patterns. It wasn't just a technological connection. It was a symbiotic relationship that defied conventional understanding. "We're not building a weapon," Dr. Nakamura often said. "We're creating a living philosophy of human potential." The materials used in the Indomitable's construction told a story of their own. Nano-adaptive alloys that could self-repair, quantum-locked molecular structures that could change physical properties on demand, energy conversion systems that turned potential damage into usable power. Each component was a testament to humanity's fundamental approach to challenge, not just to resist, but to transform. Outside the complex, Mars itself seemed to watch. The red planet, once considered a hostile environment, now stood as a testament to human terraforming capabilities. If humans could turn a dead planet into a thriving ecosystem, what could they do to a starship? As the final calibrations were made, the research team knew they weren't just preparing a vessel for war. They were sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and the rules of engagement were about to change forever. Deep within the Zarkov Communications Hub, a junior analyst named Vornak felt something was wrong, not through any specific alarm or warning system, but through an inexplicable sense of unease that rippled through his neural implants. The Zarkov believed in absolute control. Their communication networks were a masterpiece of hierarchical design. Every signal, every transmission meticulously monitored and regulated. Information flowed like blood through a perfectly constructed organism, with each node knowing exactly its place and purpose. What they didn't understand was the nature of human creativity. Lieutenant Kai Wang wasn't attacking the network. He was playing with it. From the Indomitable's advanced communication suite, Kai was conducting a symphony of digital disruption. Each infiltration was a brushstroke, each redirected signal, a note in a complex musical composition of chaos. He had studied Zarkov communication protocols for years, understanding them so deeply that he could now manipulate them like a master musician. The first signs were subtle. A patrol route slightly altered. A maintenance request mysteriously rerouted. Communications between mid-level commanders becoming inexplicably garbled. To the Zarkov, these were minor glitches. To Kai, they were precision instruments of psychological warfare. Araya, the ship's AI, was more than a computational system. She was a partner in this intricate dance of digital manipulation. While Kai provided the creative direction, Araya generated millions of potential interaction scenarios, finding the most destabilizing paths of interference. "We're not breaking their system," Kai muttered, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living energy. "We're teaching it to question itself." In the Zarkov Central Command, confusion began to bloom. Vornak watched as routine reports became increasingly nonsensical. Supply routes twisted into impossible geometries. Secure communication channels developed unexpected echoes and interference patterns that defied traditional debugging. What the Zarkov didn't realize was that each of these interruptions was carefully designed. They weren't random. They were a calculated dismantling of institutional confidence. A communication relay in the Obsidian sector suddenly reported an entire squadron of ships that didn't exist. Another transmission suggested a critical supply line had been compromised by an imaginary threat. Each false signal was constructed with such meticulous detail that it would take hours to definitively prove it was fabricated. Kai understood something fundamental about information warfare that the Zarkov had never comprehended. In a system built on absolute certainty, doubt was the most powerful weapon. Aria's quantum processors calculated the psychological impact of each intervention. The goal wasn't just to disrupt. It was to create a cascading effect of institutional paranoia. Every commander would start questioning every transmission, every order, every piece of intelligence. Chaos, Kai whispered, is just another form of communication. As the Indomitable continued its silent intrusion, the Zarkov network began to eat itself, one carefully placed doubt at a time. Admiral Krultux of the Zarkov Stellar Armada had spent centuries perfecting the art of space warfare. His battle group was considered the most formidable in the quadrant, a precision instrument of military might that had crushed countless civilizations. The incoming human vessel represented nothing more than another footnote in the Empire's long history of conquest. He was wrong. The first indication came not through sensors or tactical displays, but through an almost imperceptible sense of wrongness that crept through the battle group's communication networks. It started as a whisper, a slight delay in tactical response, a momentary hesitation in weapon synchronization. Tactical Officer Vren noticed it first. A targeting matrix that should have been razor-sharp suddenly felt fuzzy, imprecise, as if the very laws of probabilistic engagement were subtly shifting beneath their feet. The Indomitable didn't approach like a traditional warship. It moved like a living thought, a quantum probability made manifest. Where Zarkov tactical algorithms predicted movement, the human vessel existed in a state of deliberate uncertainty. Commander Rodriguez understood something fundamental about combat that transcended traditional military doctrine. War wasn't about destroying the enemy. It was about dismantling their ability to conceptualize conflict. Each maneuver of the Indomitable was a complex mathematical statement, not just a movement, but an argument against the very principles of predictable engagement. When Zarkov ships launched their primary plasma torpedoes, the human vessel didn't just dodge. It seemed to alter the very probability of the projectile's existence. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the Indomitable's tactical coordinator, worked in perfect symbiosis with ARIA. Her neural interface didn't just control the ship, it became the ship. Each decision was a collaborative burst of intuition and computational precision that defied traditional understanding of human-machine interaction. "They're trying to establish a pattern," Chen muttered, her eyes reflecting complex holographic trajectories that looked more like abstract art than tactical diagrams. "We'll give them a pattern they can't comprehend." The Zarkov battle group found themselves fighting an opponent that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Their ships began to turn on each other, not through external hijacking, but through a cascading effect of tactical confusion that made cooperation impossible. Admiral Krultux watched in mounting horror as his perfectly constructed battle formation dissolved into chaos. It wasn't that the human ship was destroying them. It was systematically unraveling the very concept of their military doctrine. One by one, Zarkov capital ships found their weapon systems redirected, their communication channels transformed into nonsensical streams of data. What should have been a decisive engagement became a study in institutional paralysis. "This isn't combat," Chen said quietly to ARIA. "This is education." In the cold vacuum of space, the Indomitable moved like a living philosophy, each moment a statement about the nature of conflict, adaptation, and human potential. In the vast communication archives of the Zarkov Central Intelligence, there was a classified division known as the Narrative Preservation Unit. Its purpose was to control, shape, and maintain the Empire's collective memory. Historians, linguists, and psychological warfare experts worked in perfect synchronization to ensure that the Zarkov story was always one of unquestioned superiority. Librarian Krenax never expected a human transmission to dismantle everything he understood about information control. The first broadcast came without warning. Not a military communique, not a diplomatic missive, but a deeply personal narrative that bypassed all traditional communication protocols. It was a compilation of individual stories, survivors, children, families torn apart by the Zarkov's systematic colonial destruction. But this was no simple emotional appeal. Each story was meticulously crafted, backed by forensic data, cross-referenced historical records, and quantum-verified testimonies. The human communication team had transformed raw human suffering into a precision instrument of psychological deconstruction. A recording of a young terraforming engineer, her voice breaking as she described her parents' final moments on a colony world. Holographic reconstructions showing the exact trajectory of Zarkov plasma cannons. Personal logs, recovered communication fragments, scientific analysis. Each piece a needle precisely positioned to unravel the fabric of institutional denial. Araya, the Indomitable's AI, was more than a computational system. She was a narrative architect, weaving these stories into a tapestry that attacked the very foundations of Zarkov cultural mythology. The broadcasts didn't just expose atrocities. They systematically dismantled the Zarkov's self-perception of moral righteousness. Where previous resistance movements had failed through direct confrontation, the humans were executing a far more sophisticated assault. Junior officers began to question. Colonial administrators started secret communications. The transmission wasn't just information. It was a virus of consciousness, spreading doubt faster than any physical weapon could penetrate. Krenax watched in horror as the narrative preservation unit's carefully constructed historical framework began to crumble. These weren't just stories. They were quantum-verified truth bombs, each personal account a precisely calculated charge, designed to breach the most robust psychological defenses. The human communication team, led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez's sister, Dr. Julia Rodriguez, understood something fundamental about information warfare that the Zarkov had never comprehended. True power lies not in controlling the narrative, but in allowing suppressed truths to speak. Each broadcast was timestamped, location verified, with forensic details that made denial impossible. Quantum encrypted authentication ensured that every piece of information could be traced, verified, and cross-referenced. We're not just fighting a war, Julia muttered to her team. We're rewriting the entire concept of historical accountability. The Zarkov didn't just lose battles. They were losing their ability to believe in themselves. The Zarkov home system of Krelvax Prime was not just a planetary capital. It was the genetic and cultural heart of an empire that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. Massive orbital complexes resembled intricate crystalline structures, each module a testament to centuries of technological accumulation. Defensive systems so complex they made other species' military installations look like primitive children's toys. High Counselor Xanthor stood in the central governance chamber, his tentacular appendages moving with practiced precision across holographic control interfaces. For 10 generations, the Zarkov had believed themselves untouchable. Their civilization was built on an absolute conviction of superiority, a mathematical certainty of their right to expand, to consume, to dominate. The first indication of trouble came not as an alarm, but as a subtle perturbation in their quantum communication networks. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's approach was nothing short of surgical precision. The Indomitable didn't arrive with weapons blazing. Instead, it began a systematic deconstruction of the Zarkov's most critical infrastructure that was so elegant, so mathematically perfect, that it bordered on art. Power distribution networks began to redistribute themselves, not through destruction, but through a form of computational jujitsu that redirected energy flows, creating cascading inefficiencies that the Zarkov's own systems interpreted as standard operational procedures. Araya, the ship's AI, was conducting the symphonic dismantling of an entire civilization's technological infrastructure. Each intervention was a note, each redirection a chord in a complex musical composition of systemic transformation. Critical research facilities found their most sensitive projects subtly altered, not destroyed, transformed. Weapons research databases began producing solutions to humanitarian challenges. Military development centers discovered their algorithms repurposed for ecological restoration. The very tools of oppression were being quietly converted into instruments of potential healing. Xanthor watched in mounting horror as the Zarkov's most secure systems began to unravel. This wasn't an attack. It was a complete reimagining of their entire technological paradigm. Communication channels opened, not with threats, but with an unprecedented proposal. Detailed reconstruction plans. Pathway to redemption. The comprehensive strategy for the Zarkov to transform from a civilization of conquest to one of collaborative development. The humans weren't just defeating the Zarkov. They were offering them a future they had never conceived possible. "We could destroy you completely," came a transmission from the Indomitable. But extinction is a failure of imagination. Each system intervention was backed by quantum-verified data, forensic historical analysis, and a level of strategic empathy that the Zarkov found more terrifying than any weapon. The humans were presenting not just in defeat, but a comprehensive alternative to their entire way of existing. In the governance chamber, High Counselor Xanthor realized something profound. They were no longer facing an enemy. They were confronting a civilization that understood power not as domination, but as transformation. The Zarkov were about to learn that true strength wasn't about maintaining control, but about the capacity to fundamentally change. The diplomatic chamber on the neutral space station Nexus 9 was unlike any negotiation venue in galactic history. Instead of a traditional circular table, the room featured a dynamic, holographic landscape that shifted and transformed with each spoken word, visualizing the complex web of diplomatic interactions in real time. Ambassador Claire Mbeek represented humanity, but she was far more than a traditional diplomat. A geneticist by training, a xenosociologist by passion, and a strategic negotiator by necessity. She understood that true diplomacy was about creating systems, not just signing treaties. The Zarkov delegation arrived in stages, not as a unified front, but as a carefully curated selection of representatives from different societal sectors. Military strategists, ecological restoration experts, cultural preservation specialists, and quantum economists. Each brought a fragment of their civilization's potential future. What made the negotiations unique was humanity's approach. This wasn't about punishment or subjugation. It was about comprehensive systemic redesign. Your current civilization is a complex adaptive system, Ambassador Mbeek explained, her words manifesting as intricate algorithmic patterns in the holographic landscape. We're not here to destroy that system. We're here to help you evolve it. The terms were revolutionary. Reparations would be paid not in traditional currency, but through collaborative development projects. Colonies would be restored. Scientific knowledge would be shared. But more importantly, the Zarkov would be given a comprehensive pathway to reimagine their entire societal structure. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat to the side, her cybernetic interface subtly collecting and analyzing every microscopic interaction. Araya, the ship's AI, processed communication patterns, emotional resonances, and potential future scenarios with unprecedented depth. The negotiations weren't linear. They were a multidimensional dance of potential futures. Each proposed clause was immediately run through millions of predictive models, examining not just immediate consequences, but generational impacts. A Zarkov ecological expert named Zinral found herself unexpectedly moved. The human proposals weren't just diplomatic. They were a comprehensive healing strategy for an entire civilization that had lost its way. Compensation for destroyed colonies would come through joint terraforming projects. Military research centers would be transformed into collaborative scientific institutes. The very infrastructure of conquest would be repurposed into instruments of creation. We're offering you a reset, Ambassador Mbeek said, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. The holographic landscape began to show potential future scenarios, restored ecosystems, collaborative research stations, integrated cultural exchanges. Each visualization was a living blueprint of possibility. For the first time in their history, the Zarkov were being offered something more valuable than victory, a chance to become something entirely new. The Memorial Garden on Luna Station was unlike any traditional military monument. Instead of static statues or somber granite, it was a living, breathing ecosystem, a deliberate metaphor for humanity's approach to conflict and resolution. Captain Elena Rodriguez walked among holographic memory streams that captured moments from the mission. Each projection was more than a historical record. It was a living archive of human potential. Quantum-preserved memories flickered around her, showing not just the battles, but the nuanced moments of strategic brilliance that defined the campaign. Her younger sister, Dr. Julia Rodriguez, waited near the central nexus of the memorial. Where Elena had been the weapon, Julia had been the architect of narrative, the one who transformed raw data into a powerful tool of cultural transformation. "It's not about what we did," Julia said, her hand brushing against a living data vine that captured personal stories from the conflict. "It's about what we've shown is possible." The Indomitable wasn't just returning as a warship. It was coming home as a symbol of a fundamental shift in human understanding of power, conflict, and potential. Xenoanthropologists from dozens of emerging civilizations studied the mission records, not as a military case study, but as a comprehensive blueprint for civilizational problem-solving. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had weaponized empathy without losing strategic edge. Dr. Marcus Chen, the ship's original chief engineer, was already working on the next phase. The technological innovations developed during the mission were being rapidly transformed into collaborative research initiatives. Quantum communication technologies that had been used for tactical interference were now being adapted for cross-species medical research. Shield technologies were being repurposed for planetary ecological restoration. Araya, the ship's AI, had become something more than a military system. She was now a diplomatic research entity, her complex algorithms being studied by artificial intelligence experts across multiple civilizations. She represented a new model of artificial intelligence, one that understood context, empathy, and potential far beyond simple computational logic. The Zarkov transformation was just the beginning. Other emerging civilizations watched, analyzed, understood that humanity represented something fundamentally different. Not a species of conquerors, but architects of possibility. Elena Rodriguez understood that the true victory wasn't in the mission's success, but in the paradigm shift it represented. Conflict was no longer about destruction. It was about comprehensive transformation. As the Indomitable's crew disembarked, they weren't returning as conquering heroes. They were returning as ambassadors of a new way of understanding power, potential, and collective progress. The Memorial Garden continued to grow, each plant a living testament to a mission that had changed everything.